Hello and welcome to this week's episode of Raising Healthy Mothers. Today I wanted to take you behind the scenes a little bit and share a story of a client that I've been working with one-to-one over the past couple of months or so. So she started working with me back in May when she signed up for the Recover package. This is my 6-month package. It is my kind of signature transformation, I suppose you might say, because it is really, really high touch. We meet on a really regular basis and everything is completely tailored to what comes up in those sessions. And it also includes a blood test, which is really, really essential to understand the underlying why of the exhaustion that goes beyond just broken sleep. And this is something that I added into my packages just in the last 6 months or so, because every single time I was getting a new client coming in, it was almost always because of exhaustion or fatigue. I knew that there was an underlying nutrient depletion in there. So I'd often get clients coming in and then we'd take their case and I'd say, okay, it's worth getting a comprehensive blood test done. You can go to your GP or you can pay for a private blood test. So quite often they would go back to their GPs with their symptoms. I'd usually write a letter and their GP would run a blood test to get a kind of basic understanding of what is going on with their bloods. The problem was I'd get those results back and I'd have a look at them and I'd be like, okay, this gives us a bit of an understanding of what's going on, but actually it doesn't give us the full picture, because usually the blood tests that the GPs will do, it's just there to kind of see if there is anything they need to investigate further, and it comes back with the reference ranges that tell you whether there's something like really, really big problem going on there or whether things are just normal. But of course in the work that I do, we're talking about wanting to be optimal, not normal. And so many of the mums that I talk to come to me because they feel like they haven't got an answer to the symptoms that they're feeling from their GPs. Because I say, I'm really, really tired, I'm really exhausted. And sometimes I just get told, well, it's just normal, it's just what mum life is like. And yes, it is true that mum life is tiring and exhausting. But I know, based on my experience and those of my clients, that there is so much we can do to help you. Anyway, so that's why I started bundling in the comprehensive blood test to my Recover package, because I thought, you know what, rather than waste time going to the GP, getting tests and then retested and then looking for other tests, actually, why don't we just bundle it all in, get it done straight away so we know what we're dealing with immediately. So that's one of the first things we do. Anyway, back to this case that I wanted to talk about. Why am I sharing this? Because I wanted you to get a feel for what this kind of support really looks like in everyday life. It's quite easy to think, I'm going to go and see a nutritionist and they're going to give me a meal plan and then I'll feel better. But the thing that gets in the way of things happening is feeling like you have to rely on motivation and willpower, dealing with life challenges, which, as we know as mums, happens all the time, and adapting within your personal life, the season of life that you're in right now. Like, things change all the time, right? As mums, like what you're doing with your child 6 months ago is completely different than you're doing with them now or in 6 months' time, especially if they're under 2. Like, things change so fast, right? That's why it's not just as simple as coming to a nutritionist and being given a meal plan and following it exactly and then feeling better completely. Like, it's all about how we can adapt it to your everyday life. So this client that came to me, she came to me, as I said, back in May, and during our initial consultation, we talked about what her motivation for working with me was. And for her, it was to improve her energy levels and understand how best to nourish her aging body. Those were her exact words. And this is really common again, because a lot of the mums that I talk to are often, what we might call slightly older mums. So often they're mums of young children, so under 6-year-olds, but they themselves maybe had their children a little bit later in life. I mean, I was 34 when I had my eldest and 36 when I had my youngest, and that is considered an old mum. And I know a lot of mums have children, whether it's the first time or subsequent times, in their late 30s or 40s as well. So I do know that quite often when my clients come to me and they have sort of, say, 6-year-olds and they themselves are in their 40s, it is, they are feeling really exhausted, not just because of dealing with motherhood, but also dealing with hormonal changes and just dealing with the changes that your body is going through as you get older. Now, that doesn't mean that I say, oh, this is your, you are old and this is your aging body and this is what you have to live with. No, we are about how can we optimize that, because we know that we can be genuinely well long into our old age. We don't have to be an unwell old person. We can be a well old person. But do you know what? It starts right now. So when we started working together, symptoms that she wanted to address were obviously her fatigue and her exhaustion, but also her cravings and her weight gain as well. She noticed that she was finding that she it wasn't so easy to lose weight as it used to be, and she had a lot of cravings as well. She was on maternity leave, her youngest was about to turn 1 and her eldest was at school. So we all know that when we've got children of different ages, their needs are so different, especially when you've got a school age one, and we all know that that comes with lots of big feelings, lots of changes, and of course the big feelings surrounding having a younger sibling and having to deal with sharing your parents. So of course, you know, lots of big emotions in the house a lot. She was carrying the bulk of the mental load, as a lot of mums do, and she was feeling really depleted, achy, like her body just felt like it was getting old, and she was stuck in this low energy cycle. And you know, I remember only really feeling like I had it together when my youngest was 18 months old. And I remember before that just feeling like I was really not doing well enough, like I should have it together, I should know what I was doing. But it was ages before I really felt like I knew what I was doing in motherhood. So I just wanted to say, like, as a caveat there, it can take a really long time for life as a mum of, you know, young children to feel like it actually makes sense and start running relatively smoothly. And I'd say my youngest is 4 in October, and I'd say, like, for the most part, for the first time, my life feels more predictable, in the sense that I feel like my house is fairly easy to clean up now. I feel like I have my systems in place for dinner. I feel like, generally speaking, I am much better supported, but it's taken a long time to get here. So I guess what I just want to remind you here is that things change over time, and it can take a while. And actually, I was talking to a colleague recently who wanted a little bit of support with formulating a plan for one of her own clients, because this client was an overwhelmed, exhausted mum, but this colleague of mine, this nutritionist, wasn't actually a mum herself, and I think she just wasn't entirely sure how to make sure that what she was going to suggest wasn't going to be overwhelming. And the thing that I really kind of hammered home to her actually was that the thing about motherhood is that things change as the seasons of life change in motherhood, which I mentioned already. But that doesn't mean that we just shrug our shoulders and wait until things are better, in inverted commas, because we can put systems and changes in place to look after us now, how we are right now. And yes, things are going to look different in 2 months or 6 months or a year's time, but we can do it now. And with exhausted mums, when you're depleted and overwhelmed, we have to do things very step by step. And that's why my 6-month recover program is all about taking things very step by step. You know, what I tend to do is I kind of have my initial consultation and I get everything out on my brain onto a piece of paper of all the things I want to do with her, and then I stage it across the 6 months, because I know if I give an exhausted, overwhelmed mum 10 things to do all in one go after that initial consultation, and then say, okay, off you go and I'll see you in 6 weeks time, she's not going to do it. Like, it's so overwhelming. I wouldn't do it. I couldn't do it. And I'm very motivated as a nutritionist. So that's why when I work with clients over that kind of longer period, we can really take things step by step. So one of the first things that we did with this client is that we got her comprehensive blood test done, as I said, and we talked through her blood results when they came back. So I found that her iron and folate were all on the lower end of optimal, and these are your energy markers, which obviously makes sense, because if you're exhausted and you're fatigued, then those things are going to show up as low. The thing is, the reason why you need to know exactly which one is low because you need to know which one to support, and whether you need to do it with supplements or whether food is going to be enough. And that obviously is going to depend on what the levels actually look like. And then we also found that her HbA1c, which shows how your blood sugars are kind of coping over the last couple of months, it gives you like a historical snapshot of your blood sugar management, was higher than ideal. So based on her food diary, I could see that she was often having chocolate and crisps at about 4 o'clock in the afternoon, and she said that was when her cravings would hit as well. So those markers, that marker, the HbA1c, showing that her blood sugars were higher than normal, made sense based on what we could see from her symptoms of fatigue, that difficulty shifting weight, and those cravings at 4 o'clock as well. And as I said, like, I looked at her food diary, and, you know, her breakfast and her dinner actually looked okay on paper. But her lunches were usually quite grab and go. And so by mid-afternoon, she was eating chocolate, biscuits and snacks and all those things as well. So I could identify that if she was clearly having a bit of a sugar crash in the mid-afternoon, she was also, if that was often when we feel quite overwhelmed, quite touched out if we've been with our children all day as well. And quite often when we just feel like we just need a bit of a comfort, basically. It's a bit of a comfort food thing, isn't it? So although that was what it looked like, we didn't just jump straight into, okay, you must cut out all of those snacks and you must change everything all in one go. Here's a strict meal plan and here's a strict protocol. As you know, that is not how I work. That is not how I do things. We started with what feels manageable for her right now. So what is going to work in her season of life? So the first 3 action steps that we took was to improve her lunches. So as I said, her lunches were generally quite grab and go, sandwiches and crisps and so on. And we moved towards having jacket sweet potatoes, grain bowls or salads, and a lot more veg as well. So, and what this meant was that she had to get a little bit more organized with batch prepping. And that really worked for her brain. Now, obviously, if I had a client who was just like, oh, I just can't batch prep, I don't have any time at the weekends, or I just can't fathom the idea of that, then we would do something a little bit different. Because another approach that I might take is something like mix and match lunch ideas, where you just have a pantry that is stocked full of super quick and easy grab and go ideas. And that's something I think I introduced to her as well. But mainly what worked for her was to have some jacket sweet potatoes that she had pre-cooked at the weekend, a nice big batch of roast veg, and then she could put whatever she wanted together as a leftover, whether it's a grain bowl or on top of a jacket sweet potato, and it worked really, really well for her. The other thing we introduced in that first month was a daily lunchtime walk. And when I looked at her kind of lifestyle diary and her questionnaire, she didn't really have any kind of formal movement plan across her day. Now, obviously, ideally, I'd love for her to be strength training and to be doing yoga and doing all these things, lots and lots of things. But knowing what her season of life is right now, we decided that a daily walk after lunch was going to help her. And that is also going to really help with her blood sugars. Because what we find is that when you go and do some movement or some exercise soon after eating, usually around about half an hour after eating, your body deals with the sugar that's come in from that meal, whether it's in the form of actual sugar or just in the form of carbs. It just deals with it better if you move soon after eating. Now, obviously, you're not going to go off and do something really vigorous after you've eaten some food, but even just a 10-minute walk around the block is going to make a huge difference to your blood sugar levels. But also I knew, because there was a lot of stress going on, she didn't have any me time whatsoever, there was a lot of overwhelm. I knew that going out for a daily lunchtime walk was actually going to help with that stress. It was going to get her that movement in, and it was also going to really help with that low energy and that fatigue. Because although we feel like when we're really low in energy or we're really tired, all we want to do is just rest and do nothing, actually sometimes getting out, especially getting out in nature to do a bit of movement, to do some walking, is really going to help with that low energy. And people come back and they're much, much higher energy, much more like almost buzzing, right? And it also helps to give her that little bit of mental reset as well. And of course, she was taking her 1-year-old out with her, but that's around about his nap time anyway, so it kind of works out quite well from that point of view as well. But also, children really benefit from getting out in nature as often as possible. So even if you can't actually get out on your own, it's really beneficial for everyone to get out after lunch. And then the third thing that we actually did in that first month was talked about a little bit of sleep support, so how to get back to sleep if you wake up in the night. Now, as it happened, she actually didn't really need that sleep support. So she had been finding that she'd been waking up a lot in the night, and not being able to get back to sleep. So we talked about some strategies that would help with that, but actually her sleep improved anyway without the need for that. And I would suspect that a lot of that would be to do with having much, much more balanced blood sugar levels, which can, if they're not balanced, if they're kind of doing that roller coaster thing, then you are going to be waking up in the night because your body is just going to have that sudden dip in blood sugars in the middle of the night. So those were relatively small changes that we made. And as I said, we were working together for 6 months. So I knew that we were going to build on that over the next 5 months. Like, I knew that they were quite small changes, but I knew we would be able to build on that. They gave her a lot more energy, and they really helped to improve her mood as well. And it made her feel like she was doing something for herself as well. Like, going out for those walks made her feel like herself again. I do really try to start with quite small steps that give you more energy, because once you have more energy, you then have more headspace and capacity for making more changes, bigger changes. Things that would feel way too challenging in the early kind of part of the 6-month process would start feeling more doable later on. But that is why it is a collaboration. Like, there's no point coming to me and me saying, here's a 10-step plan, here's what you need to do to feel better, go away and I'll see you in 6 weeks time. If I tell you to do that, then there's no back and forth around how it's actually going to work in your life. I can't tell you what to do. I don't live your life. We have to negotiate and discuss what feels doable. And that's why I talk about it as a collaboration. And as part of that kind of 6-month package, you get ongoing chat access to me, unlimited chat access, so that if anything comes up, if you have any questions, if you need any support, then I can answer them straight away rather than waiting for a new consultation. Obviously, I have boundaries about when I can answer them and how long between and how long you might have to wait. But the point is that you don't have to wait for a long consultation. But also we meet weekly. In the first 2 months of that 6-month package, I suggest that we meet weekly. And that's because things change quite a lot in 1 week, and it is important to adapt and tweak as we go. As I said, I'm really not about overwhelm. There's no point giving you a big plan and then you feeling overwhelmed, but then feeling like you can't tell me because it's just too embarrassing, because you feel like you failed. There's no such thing as failure in my programs, because often what happens actually after the initial consultation is my clients go away feeling super motivated, really excited to change. They finally invested in themselves. They've finally done something for themselves. And then they maybe try and make all of the changes at once, or they reread the plan and feel like it's completely overwhelming. But then something happens, like a challenge. Maybe your children get sick all at once. Maybe you go on holiday. Maybe there's a birthday party and you're like, oh, I've got to get back on track. I've failed. And then you're overwhelmed again. But if we take it step by step every single month and we check in on a weekly basis, then we can respond to those challenges and we can make a plan before the challenges come up. And that's exactly what I'm going to talk you through next, because that's what happened to this client in the 2nd month of working together. We were scheduled to meet for a Zoom call, because that's how I do all of my sessions, through Zoom. And we were scheduled to do a call. And the day before, my client messaged me and said, we've got a lot of sickness here at the moment. I'm going to do my best to be there, but, we might be a bit distracted. So I said, look, it's fine. You let me know by the end of this evening if you actually feel like you can do it. If you can't, or if it feels too disruptive, perhaps we can switch to a chat consultation instead. And actually, I have found these work really, really well. We don't get through as much. We talk about a lot less stuff in a chat, but actually there's a lot more back and forth. You have a bit more time to think things through. Like, obviously, if you have to respond to something like a child being sick, then you can go and do that. Anyway, so we set up a chat session instead of a Zoom session. Both children were unwell. Her sleep had been very disrupted. She was feeling very snappy, and she was actually feeling quite low as well. And she had noticed a return to snacking and that low energy dip as well. And it was quite interesting because I had identified it herself before I even got a chance to kind of coach her through it. She spotted it in her food diary that she was having a lot of sweet breakfasts, which on paper looked fine. Relatively high protein, they were high fiber, they were, pretty, on paper looked good. But what she noticed was when she had a sweet breakfast, she would have cravings in the afternoon. And she was the one who spotted this. And these are my favorite kind of clients, when they can look at their food diary and they can do the reflection for themselves. And I'm just there to facilitate that reflection. So she was having granola and yogurt, and it was fine. It was satisfied her. But by mid-afternoon, she was still craving, even though we had changed her lunches quite significantly. They looked completely different than they used to, but she was still finding that she was having these snacking as well. So sweet breakfasts, even those healthy looking ones like granola and yogurt and fruit, can spike your blood sugars quite early in the day, and that can lead to that mid-afternoon crash where you start wanting chocolate and even crisps just to pep you up a little bit. So if instead we can balance blood sugars early on, we focus on breakfast and make them savory instead of sweet, everything else kind of falls into place for the rest of the day. And I always say starting with breakfast is such a good idea, because if you pack your breakfast full of protein, if you keep it savory, have lots of fiber, lots of vegetables, then you've already started your day. Like a third of your meals is already sorted, isn't it? So we talked about experimenting. So, instead of doing a complete overhaul, what felt doable for her. And for her, she really felt that changing to a savory breakfast would really help. And she also talked about switching her mindset around from thinking about breakfast as this kind of separate meal where you can have sweet stuff, that actually it's just another meal. Just like lunch and just like dinner, breakfast is just another meal. And this is absolutely brilliant to think about it like that, because it is, for some reason breakfast has become this only meal in the day where we're allowed to have sweet stuff. Like, you very rarely have a sweet dinner without having something savory at least beforehand. So we talked about various savory options like egg muffins, just using leftovers, tinned fish, which amazingly she was open to, or even if all you manage is a smoothie, to make sure that you add some protein in there as well. So as I mentioned, in the first month, when we first started working together, we focused on switching our lunches, because that was the meal at the time that felt like it needed the most work. And I thought it would help with that 3:00 chocolate fix. So it was very interesting that she identified herself that she noticed a difference when she changed her breakfast to more savory options. Remember, on paper, her breakfast looked okay. It was yogurt, it was fruit, seeds, it was whole food pancakes, smoothies, overnight oats, granola. it all looks okay on paper, and often when you look, if you search healthy breakfast options, those are the kind of options that come up. And it is, in fact, food that I would often recommend to clients and on my seasonal resets as well. But it was very interesting that she identified herself that when she focused on sweet breakfasts, they were affecting her blood sugars. And like I said, this is my favorite type of client because she took her own step back and noticed those patterns. She knew how she felt. She could see the patterns developing. And it actually taught me a very important lesson about relying too much on sweet breakfasts. As I said, we talk about getting away with breakfasts that are sweet and sugary and fruity, and I'm usually, when I think about that, I'm usually referring to things like toast and jam and cereals. But actually what she reminded me was that even the sweet breakfasts that we consider healthy because they're full of fiber and protein could still be affecting your blood sugars later on, and you wouldn't really know until you do that experimentation. Now, the other thing that was quite interesting with this client is that she joined, as all my clients get to join my seasonal resets as just part of their package, right? So the one that we had done was the spring gut reset, and that meant that we did cut out gluten and dairy for a whole week. And she said she noticed that she felt really good on that reset. There was way less snacking. And I know this because obviously she was continuing to fill out her food diary. So I was still looking at it and still looking through it. And I could see that she was not having that snack at 3-4 o'clock in the afternoon. And she noticed herself that she had a lot more energy. By the end of the reset, real life came back. There was a birthday, they had cake. Obviously there was gluten and dairy came back in. And the week after, when the reset had ended, we could immediately see the effects where chocolate was creeping back in. So obviously, as a coach, I can see that, and I can see that pattern, and she was able to connect those dots. And I always tell my clients, like, life is for living. I don't want you to feel that you can't celebrate birthdays, that you can't enjoy cake, that if you do that, then you're kind of getting off the wagon, and then you have to punish yourself by getting back on the wagon, feel like you're failing, that you've broken the plan. There is no plan in the way I work. There is what feels good to you, what gives you energy, what helps you sleep well at night, what keeps you going between meals without craving. And once you've worked out your baseline, what works for you, then you know it's always there for you. So, eat the birthday cake, enjoy the summer barbecue, and then when you're ready, you can come back to your baseline, your foundation that works for you. And that's why when we start, we always start with that foundation. And the other thing worth knowing is that the longer you stick to your baseline, that as long as you know what your baseline is and the closer you stick to that for longer, the more you can get away with the curveballs that life throws you. And I hate using the term get away because it's kind of a bit like that cheating or that failing thing, but that's not what I mean. What I mean is that when you're moving away from your baseline, it affects you less and less mentally, emotionally, but also in terms of how long it then takes you to come back to yourself. And that's when you feel fully in control, not when you're feeling super strict and you have to count calories or carbs or whatever it is that is trendy right now. Instead of doing that, you're just able to know this is my healthy baseline, and that's what I can get back to when I need to. And that's why working together for 6 months is so important, because it can take time to work it out. Now, obviously, with this client, she worked out that actually the savory breakfasts were the things that were going to help her over the sweet breakfast. And she knew that based on her experimentation. So that's why context is so important. There is no perfect plan. There's only life. And the beauty of working together over a certain period of time is that we can adapt and we can kind of do this together every step of the way. Now, obviously, now we're sort of 2 months into working together. She's become so much more aware of what works for her. She is able to choose that savory breakfast most days, knowing that that effect on her in the afternoon, is linked to her breakfasts. And obviously I'm always there to support her and to help with resources and so on. So it's not about just kind of doing everything at once, but doing enough to feel better. It's definitely not about perfection. It's about feeling in control, even when things feel really chaotic, when life is challenging, when everyone has fallen sick all at once. And remember, at the time of recording, we're only just coming up to 2 months working together. We still have 4 months to go. We have so much time to work through these things together. Once we pass that 2-month mark, we're going to start meeting fortnightly instead of weekly, and she will start experimenting with using her food diary less and less. Instead of tracking her food intake constantly all the time, she's going to start taking that step away and seeing how that affects her. This is the start of intuitive, intentional eating. I'm giving her more control. I'm not breathing down her neck, because ultimately that's what we want, right? We want her to end our time together feeling in control, not having to check in with me all the time. There's still a lot to address based on her blood tests and her symptoms. And as I said, I have staged out her protocol accordingly. So over time, we'll add things in as we go, but we, of course, adapt as we go. What is coming up, hopefully over the next 4 months, is we're going to start slowly moving towards stress coping techniques and adding in more movement. So I already added in the lunchtime walk, but ideally we want to be adding in lots more stuff. Very, very important for her based on some of her blood test results. But with her current season of life, with her current scenarios, especially with how her evenings are going, opportunities for movement are limited. So we're going to work on that over time. And we do it bit by bit, slowly. But remember what I said at the start. Seasons of life can change so quickly in motherhood. And by the time we get towards our final 2 months together, her life will look so different than when she first started working with me. So from, when we started working together, her youngest wasn't even 1 year old. By the time we end, he'll be 18 months old. So a completely different life, as you can imagine. And that's why getting the nutrition foundations right early on is so important, because as capacity increases, so too can the complexity of changes that we can make together. And the thing that I've learned about working with mothers is that you have to take things step by step and slowly. It's how it worked on me. It's how I was able to slowly, very slowly make changes on myself. So slowly I didn't even notice, to be honest. But while mums need that high support initially, they very quickly adapt and learn to do it themselves. And that's my favorite part about it. When they start self-coaching themselves, when they start being able to notice the patterns and spot the changes and actually take that critical look at their habits and identify the effect it's having on them, that's when I know I've got one of those gold star clients that I know they're going to get to the end of it and they're going to get exactly what they need out of this, and it will stick with them for life. And that is true of a lot of my star clients. Are the ones who come back, they come and do the seasonal resets, they know that it's helpful to kind of have that reset, but they're starting with that foundation that we established together, so that they're already kind of way up there than anyone who comes into the resets before they've had a chance to work with me. I hope this has helped you. If it has resonated with you, maybe you're stuck in that kind of mid-afternoon snack spiral. Maybe you often notice that you get cravings. Maybe you're exhausted by 10 o'clock in the morning. Here's something to try. Switch to a savoury breakfast for the next 3 mornings and just notice how you feel. It doesn't have to be fancy. Can you boil a couple of eggs maybe? Could you make an omelette maybe? Could you batch cook some egg muffins like my client did, and just have that for breakfast and just see how it feels? Do you notice a difference in how often you're going to snack? And also, do you notice whether it fills you up in a different way than a sweet breakfast might? So this is what one-to-one support looks like with me. It's not about giving you a strict plan to follow. It's about meeting you where you're at, helping you spot what's actually going on, obviously using those blood tests to really get deep into the nutritional depletion, and then supporting you to make gentle, realistic changes that add up over time. If you have ever thought about working together one-to-one, or now that you've heard about what it's involved and you're really curious, then this is a really good time to think about booking in. My books are closed for new clients in August, but I will be opening them up again in September. And my 6-month recover package, which includes the full blood test I've already talked about and tailored support like you've heard about in this episode, it is going to increase in price in September. So if you want to lock in the current price, which includes the blood test, you can book in now, and we'll start in September. We can get started with your blood test, so we can, when we get started in September, we know exactly what we're dealing with. As I said, I'll be taking a break on taking on new clients during the summer holidays in August, but when we get started, we know exactly where to go in for when we've got your blood test back, and I've got your health questionnaire, and I've got your food diary, and we can just get going. We can dive straight into that initial consultation. So of course, if you want to start the next school year full of energy, in control, nourished from the inside out, and you know you need that accountability and structure to actually make it happen, then please get in touch and lock in the current price before they go up. You can send me an email at tasha@tashadecruz.com or a DM on Instagram, or I will put in a link to book for a health and nutrition review, which is where we all start. No matter what happens, we start with a complimentary health review just to see where you're at right now and to see which package is actually going to work best for you. And of course, if you're not ready for one-to-one work but would love me to tell you exactly what to eat every single week, then remember you can subscribe for the weekly table, which is my weekly meal planning inspiration post that's sent out every Friday morning into your inbox, so you can be ready over the weekend for the week ahead. You can find the link in the show notes. I hope that was helpful. I have loved sharing this case study with you. Of course, I had full consent from her to share the details with you. And if, as I said, if you're interested in working one-to-one, then I am here for you. Otherwise, I will see you next week for another episode of Raising Healthy Mothers. Bye for now.